maybe tired, maybe just completely worn out after many years of constant barraging and so on. You take the interaction. If you're taking a child out of somebody's home and they don't want to let that child come out of that home because you're taking them into care, if it's somebody like somebody with Alzheimer's and you go to provide some service that's intimate and they're react to it and so on, there are so many different interactions between service user and staff member that has to be taken into consideration when you're considering how would you prevent violence and aggression. And finally, you have the environment, which may be good or bad, may be overcrowded, may be congested, may be sweaty, maybe this, maybe that, maybe on the side of a mountain, out in a house on your own. And these four things are at play. And somehow or other, the system has to come up with a response that says, despite all those things at play, here's a formula that will leave the place safer to work in. And that's a big ask in many respects. So you have to go at it from a number of different perspectives. Putting the service provision first, from risk management policies. You have to watch it from a health and safety, because in case that's overlooked, legally we're bound to look after staff and to have a safe place of work. And you must have policies developed. The initiatives that we concentrated on were risk management, as I've mentioned. A huge emphasis on education and training, and that's not just about physical interventions. That includes things like, what is it that Brendan Drum needs to be educated on in relation to this? What is it that people at service provision level need to be educated on? There was a problem with physical interventions. Our study showed that there were physical interventions, and they're still taking place out there in the system, that are regarded as categorically dangerous, certainly unsafe, some of them categorically dangerous. So if, for instance, somebody was sent for an X-ray and you had a casualness around safety practices in that setting, exposure to radiation or whatever it may be, it would be frowned on, it wouldn't be acceptable, and yet we can ask staff sometimes to get involved in physical intervention techniques, and some of them are categorically dangerous, some of them should not be allowed. People are not properly trained and equipped on what ones should take place, and yet that goes on. So there's a lot to happen in the physical interventions. The study shows that one of the major themes that we need to pursue is the whole business of support. So if I get a slap this evening, or I get a bad ticking off, or I get upset, or I'm abused in some way, one of the most important things in my recovery is, does my colleague give me some support? Does my manager give me support? Do they follow it up in the following days? That whole scenario is complicated by virtue of the fact that some people don't know what to do and how to do it. They're not sure whether they're interfering. They're not sure whether they're complicating life in terms of people making claims afterwards and all of that there. And there's an absolute need for us to instill in everybody in the system the need to care about their colleague in those situations and to give that primacy of position. And whatever feels right in supporting them, that's what should be done. If there's fallout as a result afterwards because somebody has said the wrong thing or acknowledged something or whatever it may be, so be it. It's not really the issue that it might be perceived to be, but we need to instill that sort of absolute conviction there that number one position goes to supporting the staff member, whether you're the manager, whether you ring out to their home afterwards, whether you call them, whatever it may be. At one end of the spectrum, there are people who are perpetrators and who are predatory perpetrators of abuse and violence. And the question is asked whether the HSE should respond and sue those people and prosecute them on behalf of the individual, on behalf of the HSE, or whatever it may be. And first reactions tend to be, well, maybe we shouldn't and so on. But the reality is that there are some who should be prosecuted, and it's probably few rather than many. But there should be a consistent policy in this, and there should be a mechanism in the system which says, well, if I want to consider this, there's one point of contact that I can make and get consistent advice on this here, and good advice, and not just advice that is from the perspective of the HSE or the management, but from the perspective of the person who has been abused or violated in some way. And then there's a whole range of policies needed on any number of other things that have never been developed in and around this theme. We had something like 50 actions across a broad spectrum, and we are concerned that somehow or other over the next 36 months we will get into a process of working on those actions and not deliver the product. And what we most want to do is to ensure that we have product, not process, over the next 12 months. And we've taken 6 or 7 priority actions to be implemented over the next 12 months. And hopefully we can account for our stewardship in 12 months and say, yes, we have hit the spot and we've delivered on those. If we don't, I'm not sure why that might be. It may be that resources will run out. It may be because of any number of things. These are tough times to be in. But we sure as hell will aim to implement on those 12 priority actions. And they are ranging from definition, which is one of the issues why we don't know enough about this in the past, because the definition of what is abuse and violence has varied. There's something like 15, 20, 30 definitions out there. So the report gives a definition, and that should be adopted. These things need to feature in all risk management statements going forward. So it's not just about the brick that's missing from the footpath, or the steel bar that's hanging out from a wall, or the absence of this, that and the other. These things need to feature, and they need to be addressed in all risk statements. We need to know this year what our baseline is, so that whatever we do over the next couple of years, we'll know whether we're improving or not. And to get a good, proper baseline is not just a little willy-nilly job, but it's something that needs to be done thoroughly and comprehensively. Lone workers, maybe 30,000, 40,000 lone workers, and these are people who are particularly at risk, need to have a significant programme put in place. And you can do an all singing and dancing response there and get 1,000 people through the system over the next 12 months. Or you can be smarter and use the old Pareto principle and say, well, we can get 80% of the way there with 20% of the effort. Be smart about it. Use DVDs, use evidence-based good practices in this area, and maybe you can get out to 10,000 lone workers. If you train 100 people who in turn train 100 people each, then you have your 10,000 target hit. Physical interventions. We need to get to a point where we're saying what is safe and what's not safe. Some of that information is out there in the system already, but some of it is not. And some of it, interestingly enough, is couched in all sorts of maybe confusing language. I mean, there are commercial interests out there who would say what we do is accredited. And accredited by who or by whom? And what sort of authority? And how robust is that? So we want the Central Project Office to be pretty solid in their advice and guidance in this year, and that it is not up for debate hereafter as to what is a safe intervention and what is not. And then we need to develop very clear guidelines every 4 months on education and training in the first instance, support and physical interventions. So if we hit those spots over the next 12 months, we'll have done a good day's work, and that's the ambition. Is it important? And I don't have to convince you that it's important. It's hugely important. The very good news is that there is evidence now emerging from studies that are currently going on, which have been part and part of the exercise that we're doing, that you can reduce very dramatically, the incidence of abuse, the incidence of verbal abuse, physical violence, through implementation of the recommendations that are in this report. I'm talking about reducing in the first month or two by a factor of 5, 6 or 7, and it's been sustained down to, say, 50% even after 6 months, because sometimes the training is, you're very aware of it in the first months, and then it kind of dissipates over time. But even after 6 months, you can drop the incidence by half, and that's a huge impact that can be had. So there is really no excuse for the system not